All right, here we are. Underground Utilities Mapping Project Team, September 21st of 2023. Our agenda is chair opening comments for first 10. I'll blab for 5 minutes after that. Then we're going to have a treat this afternoon to be able to hear from Lindsay concerning this Buxus pipeline application that they've worked out, and we're excited to hear about that. I'll do 10 minutes of project updates. Then Nancy will help me walk through the Fusion View process update and discussion. We'll move on to where we are with the product update and discussion, followed by, Barb's favorite activity of individually throwing us under the bus for what can we do better. And then we'll wrap things up with the reminder that the next meeting will be on December 7th, a day that will live in infamy at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. And with that, Barb, the floor is yours.
Yeah, great. So we'll just get started today and kick it off. But before we do, we got good news this Tuesday morning that PHMSA awarded a technical assistance grant, a TAG grant, to share geo for the work on the mapping project. So we had a first round of funding, and now we have a commitment from PHMSA for the second round, and that should get us most, if not all, of the way to the first big step in the Fusion View software and really taking this system to the marketplace. The second big news is we've started a closed system on for a beta test between a Minnesota facility operator and a Minnesota design engineering firm. We're kind of keeping it a little quiet until we get down a little bit, but maybe it's the best kept secret. So those are two really big developments since we met last as a group. So again, thanks for all the hard work and commitment. And I know there's other people that can't be here today, but we'll fill them in as we go along.
That sounds like I better delete some slides real fast.
Oh no, you can. Let's just do it. I just wanted to be sure that it was okay.
All right, Here we go. Over to me. Here's what I got for you. Pencil it in. The leadership folks know, but if anybody else wants to commiserate, drop by, whatever. Friday, October 13th, 10 o'clock in the morning. You can see my email address down there below. I've already, as they say, you have to tell people 3 times before it sinks in. So here's number 2. Thursday, December 7th at 1 in the afternoon is when we'll meet again. And if you've got some sort of business complaints, death threats, whatever, you need to send my direction. I'll be gone October 16th through November 3rd, out wandering the planet. So if you got business with me, please try to get it in before I depart, so I have a minimal pile when I get back. Okay, next thing on the agenda here is project team updates. 2 bullets: past and future outreach and financial developments. Well, I don't know. I got this problem with clicking 2 things at the same time, but here we go. So here's what we got for past and future outreach. June 22nd was the last, as a frame of reference, June 22nd was the last time the UUMPT large group meeting occurred. July 12th, Bob and Barb were invited guests to give the lunch and learn presentation to the statewide government. They have this GIS Bites meeting that takes place. Barb, do you want to talk about that at all, or are we good just with that?
And we'll go with that. It was a good disclosure of what we're talking about.
Yep. July 25th, CGA was interested in having a little bit better understanding of where we are headed with standards, and Barb and I provided a brief for them on that. September 7th, kudos to Barb. She wrote up a nice update article for Minnesota's utility mapping project for the Excavation Safety magazine. You can Google that and find it. Right now, our counterpart, Robert Vasquez, is out in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, delivering a presentation, an invited presentation at the Energis conference out there, which is focused primarily on the Marcellus Shale development area. And there's a lot of energy companies there. October 6th or 4th through the 6th, Bob's going to get thrown under the bus again. If you're up there in Duluth, Minnesota, think about maybe swinging by the Minnesota GIS LIS conference, and Bob will be doing 2 levels of exploration on what we've been up to. And then right now there's 2 pending articles out there, one on On-Site Magazine. That's a Canadian construction magazine. And then this EPC&I, engineering, whatever the rest of it is, construction and infrastructure, that's pending also. So Barb and Dean have gone through those to make sure we don't have any aw shucks in there. And so be looking for those to come out. And I've noticed there's, kind of like there's some of these repeater sites on the web. They're picking up some of the stuff also. Here we go. All right. So the developmental contract was signed same day, June 22nd, to move from what we kind of conceptualized and thought we should try to do, and then did a prototype demo on. There was a contract signed on June 22nd. And as Lindsay alluded to, we've been sitting around here waiting to find out what would happen with the PHMSA grant, thinking that it was going to happen that first week of August. It trailed into the middle of August. And I picked up the phone and they said it literally might not come out until the last day of September. So we already are aware that, thank you very much, PHMSA. They have made my life so much easier by awarding to this project the amount of money that'll take us across the finish line on what we anticipate to be phase 1, and the opportunity for people to see, no kidding, we can do what we say we're able to do. So that came out on Tuesday, September 19th, as Barb has mentioned. I would also like to point out, happy birthday, everybody. We're all of 3 years old. August 13th of 2020 was the first official UUMPT meeting. And while 3 years is a long time, I thought as a point of reference, it would be helpful to look at what our original charter looked like and what we thought we were going to get done in the first 6 months and what we would get done during the first year. And if you look at that, you realize we were just trying to figure out how to come together as a public-private enterprise group, and that span both horizontally the expertise in the industry and vertically the zones of, decision leader down to the boots on the ground. And I think that's one of our crowning achievements to this day, is that we've been able to put this group together and have functioned the way we are. So very much like that grant that came in, you can't write a grant unless you have a story to tell. And everybody that's on this call deserves a pat on the back by virtue of the fact you have built the story of going from an idea to, no kidding, the development of an answer to a long-running problem. So here's what we're looking at. First year, creation of the administrative structure, establishment of just getting together on a regular basis, and development of sub-teams. And then you can see here, we start telling the story in 2021, and publication of at least one article. So we achieved all those things, and since then, much more. So happy birthday, everybody. All right, that takes us down to Fusion View process update. And I think we're in trouble, but here we go. Nancy, are you ready to rock and roll? Nancy. Hello, Nancy. Oh my gosh. Nancy, are you there?
Browse.
Can't hear you.
equipment.
Tell you what, should I jump ahead and we can come
Yep,
back? You can
sure,
nod your
that's-
head. Okay. All right. So overcoming technical hurdle after technical hurdle. Nancy's going to update us on follow-up interviews with locators and software developers so that we can have a better idea of how maybe after just hearing from facility operators, whether or not there's been a change in the story. So that takes us down to process versus product. And what I want to try to drive home with this set of slides is the idea that we're developing simultaneously process and product. And I think that makes it an easy way mentally to sort things out. But if you'll look at the green blocks, that's what we've built to date. You know, obviously you're part of this large group, which provides a resource, informational input, discussion, and end user input through these quarterly meetings, 20 to 25 participants, 60 invited, up to the leadership team there on the left-hand side, which in the interim serves as the decision-making assist to go for state one call, coordination and outreach. And as I mentioned earlier, to keep things as vendor neutral as possible, lives under the auspices of the state committee of the Emergency Preparedness Committee of the Minnesota Geospatial Advisory Council. And then so Barb is anticipating that as we move into actual production software, the functioning piece, we're going to need some tweaks coming in from the end user community to ensure that the delivery of product to them suits their ultimate needs. And we're continuing still to build out that group, but it will get far more active as we move forward. So again, this is the process stuff that was built up from the very beginning. And then this takes us to this slide of how do you sort this thing out? How do you think about it? Process. Who should be involved? How do we structure? When should we meet? Who does what? Where do we get money? Admin hurdles to adoption. But that all feeds down to where we are right now, and that's this onboarding piece, bringing on our first organizations, which we are calling our pioneer partners. And then over on the right-hand side, you see the piece that's the product of technical hurdles to implementation. What examples already exist? Handling different levels of data, handling different levels of access, how to protect data, or how to display attributes. Some of those being the ideas behind fencing off or thinking about that product piece as being somewhere of its own. But ultimately, it gets down to the same issue of onboarding. And you can see with that very last line there, where we are right now in moving through this process. We are proceeding with utmost caution, onboarding our first statewide pioneer partner. So I've let the cat out of the bag, and more or less the two that we're currently working with are MnDOT and WSB. So create access to MnDOT data through Fusion View so that an engineering firm can obtain what they need as a design project. And so in late June, Barb was able to obtain cooperation verbals from MnDOT and WSB as being our first partners in crime on this effort. And we are exceptionally thankful to both of those organizations because they realize we're crawling right now and making sure that we work through how to do this correctly. So on July 17th, was our first large group meeting, and that was both process and product people. And out of that meeting came the concurrence that we would proceed with doing the development. On August 15th was the second large group meeting, and from that, the determination of respective technical teams and the decision on what example data set would be used. On August 23rd, we moved into doing just technical to technical team. And then on August 24th was a conversion over to OCC's Shared Geo Weekly meeting. Those folks from WSB and MnDOT were brought into that process then. And then on September 7th, the weekly tech-to-tech meeting occurred. September 14th, tech-to-tech, followed by the third large group meeting in the afternoon. Final determination of the data set and the authentication protocol that was going to be used were determined, and we are that last, second to last, I should say, bullet there. The end of September, validation, we should see within the next week to 10 days, validation of the first active link up between using Fusion View. And mark my words, Mr. Watson, come here. As humble as this start is, anybody knows that's the first words that were ever uttered over a telephone between Alexander Graham Bell in his Boston laboratory and his assistant. We will be hooking up two very different entities for the first time for the transfer of data. That is the essence of where we are starting, and we will build out from there. So next leadership, this team decision on the I should say the next step will be a leadership decision on how to proceed from there. Do we want to add access to more data, take a different approach? Those are the sort of decisions that are being mulled over as we slowly and carefully move through this process. And so I would open the floor to both Adam and Dean, and obviously Barb. Is there anything else that should be added in thinking about how we move to this point in actually implementing? Dean, do you have any additional thoughts?
No, I think you've done a pretty good job of the deliberate manner in which the tech-to-tech people are working, and I am sure that they are going to thrash through and either figure out how to solve or at least point up the areas where there's some real issues that require the greater group to be involved in figuring out how to deal with.
Okay. How about you, Adam?
Nothing to add. I've got some thoughts bouncing around in my head after the presentation with Lindsay on some things that we might want to address as far as how we interact with others in the industry, but nothing to add to your list for the first Pioneer Partners.
Okay.
It's great.
All right. Thank you, Adam. And I'll do an ops check with Nancy. Can you communicate at this point?
Well, you tell me. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
We like it. Okay.
Yeah,
right.
Sorry about that. A phone call came in and disrupted my own audio.
Okay.
I'm back.
All right. So here are the takeaways to date. And again, I'm talking process here. Baby steps. Proceed with extreme caution and deference. We are at the beg of both WSB and MnDOT for helping us, and we can't thank them enough. WSB and MnDOT, this is an unusual situation. As a starting point, we need to bring on board both a design engineer firm and a facility operator at the same time. And then future additions, we anticipate that you're only going to see one organization at a time. Our focus right now is on carving out something small which can be used to demonstrate feasibility. Once the technical details are ironed out and the capability is demonstrated, repeat, and then think about expanding the effort to an organizational or at the organizational level. And that's where Dean is gonna earn his keep in trying to make the I's crossed and the T's dotted. Well, let's hope not. But anyway, Dean will get in there and make good things happen. As the process is being developed, build documentation. Just so you have a sense of that, on June 28th, the leadership team met to discuss an overall project blueprint. What kind of approaches do we want to take? How do we tie the website in? How do we do the PR piece, etc., things of that nature. And then by September 5th, we're scoping things down to just looking at the onboarding, process, project onboard, guidelines, first draft to follow initial MnDOT WSB meetings came along, and then SMEs provided comments, and then Barb is currently refining that document down so that there is, if you will, a cookbook on the project, the overall effort of onboarding an organization. And then specific to elements, breakouts, we're going to be working on annexes to that overall project onboarding guideline thing that include tech to tech, legal, OCC, thoughts about, how their integration will work. So that gives you, if you will, I think the update on what was the second overall bullet. And I think that'll take us back to Nancy, unless there are any questions at this point. Going once, going twice, gone. All right. Here's an example of tech onboarding, kind of thing that we're trying to break out as a pick list and to know what's there and what we ought to think about. Okay, Nancy, here we go. I'm going to take you all the way back.
All right, thank you.
Just hit me alongside the head when you want to move on. There we go.
All right, very good. Yes, so when we last talked, we had done some research interviews and we've done some more. So I'll refresh you a little bit on what we did before and then how the new stuff fits in. So the idea with the research interviews was to help our developers understand the needs and the resources in the environment and describe current processes for both tickets and locators, get some idea of data characteristics, how to handle field info, and then get their feedback on what Fusion View is proposing. Next. So we had done 5 interviews with a range of facility operators, and Barb has been great at finding us folks to connect with. What we discovered after those first 5, though, was that there were 2 kinds of major players in the industry that we hadn't touched base with yet. That was ticket management software and contract locators. So again, Barb got us started on some contacts there, and we were able to do 2 interviews with those kinds of end users. We customized the questions. We wanted to keep things fairly similar, but there's different kinds of questions for these kinds of users. Okay, next.
Did I go one too many?
Yep. Think so.
Yeah, there you go. Is that what you need? One more back?
One more back? There we go. Yeah.
It's so hard to get good help, I'm telling you.
So kind of jumping again to the big conclusion from all of these. Like with the facility operators, the software companies and locators were saying getting a critical mass of facility operators is key to the success of this. If you're pulling this up and you don't have most of the actual players, it's not as valuable, but getting that tipping point where there's enough data is going to be an important thing for these users. And then again, on the additional concerns, these users being more from the locator community or the locator sides of things, they like the idea of being able to link to the Fusion View data through the call center ticket. but there were concerns about connectivity in the field because these are folks that aren't going to be using this from a desk necessarily. So that's something that we need to keep in mind in the design. So the next big thing is data sources. And I think this fits right in with actually the kinds of things that Lindsay was talking about. Both of these companies that we just interviewed work with data from hundreds of facility operators. And so it's been really interesting to hear their experiences. They suggested that the large facility operators like electric and gas will have they're the most important to protect, and they're most likely to have easier to use spatial data. They're big companies with good GIS departments, and they may actually be more willing to share because they have the most to lose. So anything that helps them protect their infrastructure is going to be a good thing. But then they also mentioned that many facility operators have, particularly the smaller ones, are going to have data in difficult to use formats. And both of these companies have done extensive work making that data usable for locators. They have staff that are just assigned to doing that process. And I think that's probably a good heads up for us and just kind of where we're going to be able to make rapid progress and where is it going to be more difficult. All right. Additional concerns that they brought up that we hadn't heard before, they pointed out that both the lines and the access points are important to locators, so that's a good thing for us to keep in mind. Next. When we talked about concerns about access, it was interesting for the facility operators. It seemed like people were pretty comfortable with the ticket security process for security. But these folks in the software and locating industry, they have extensive security built into their contracts, and they may require a security clearance for people to even get at this. So I think they're more familiar with the other side of the security, and I think we heard more of that in what Lindsay was saying as well. So for me personally, I'm still kind of struggling with, okay, who needs security about what, where, when? But I think that's something we'll have to keep an eye on. Next. Accuracy. Again, the stuff in black here is what we got from the 5 facility operators that we interviewed. In the blue is the software and locator folks that we interviewed. They agreed that accuracy varies widely. It's often not known. The locators are using the data that they get from facility operators as a general guide. But they know that at this stage in the industry, it's not always perfect. They do collect field reports that go back to the facility operators based on the contract criteria with the facility operator that they're working with. And there is some ability for high accuracy data collect, but they did bring up some questions about data ownership on that data, and should these companies be compensated for providing this high accuracy data, and how does that fit into the whole picture? And then a little bit on standards. Again, similar to the facility operators, these companies are not extensively using standards other than the requirements for paint. And part of that, they kind of brought up that standards may be more useful when you're looking at lots of different types of data, but when they're working with one client, there may be multiple kinds of data within that client, and the standard doesn't quite work for that. So, I mean, it's designed for like a different scale of detail. Next. Now, this is where I've been really thinking about this, and hopefully we can all talk about this at some point. But the facility operators that we talked to had the kinds of online endpoints that we've been thinking about in this whole design. For the software and locator companies that we talked to, they've already gone through the process of taking information that might not have been digital or, have a digital endpoint and putting that into their own systems. And so we talked just a little bit about, well, would it make sense for Fusion View to get the digital data from these folks that have already done the conversions from the facility operator? Of course, that would have to be allowed by the client contract. And this is similar to some of the things that we talked about with Logis. If there's an aggregator that's getting current data from a facility operator already, perhaps that's something that we should look into. They mentioned that many of the facility operators are providing data as a KMZ file, more like a shape file, not web services. And that there's many layers, and the multiple layers is something that we're dealing with MnDOT too, just trying to figure out, okay, there's a lot of different kinds of information here. It's not just one connection necessarily to figure out. A couple other things that I thought were interesting that was different from the facility operators. The facility operators said, oh, sure, we talk about, or we provide information to locators on abandoned infrastructure. The locators are saying, well, if the access points aren't there anymore, we still can't locate on that infrastructure. And then unknowns, the facility operators felt like these were very rare, and on the locator side, we were hearing that it happens a lot. So perhaps the Fusion View system could actually help sort out some of those unknowns, and which are really unknowns. Next. So next steps on this kind of interaction, as Steve alluded to, I think we need to review the onboarding steps and the tools being developed with actual facility operators. Whether or not we're actually onboarding them, we can start talking about this is what we're proposing and see if it works for them. And really good news, I think, for all of us is that all of the folks that we interviewed were willing to be on an advisory group, like Steve mentioned, to review progress as development proceeds. So any questions, comments on the research interviews?
Going once, going twice, gone. Thank you, Nancy. All right, where was we? Okay, we're down to we're running a little bit behind, but I think we're gonna have some slop there at the very end. The Fusion View product update. We've got some pointers from the MnDOT WSB thing, guide rails and standards, and then user interface developer. Here's the takeaways. Again, I'm trying to keep us in two different lines of thinking: process. Now we're over in product. So here are the takeaways to date that I believe are there. Authentication into FO systems may present significant challenges. Going into the MnDOT system, we're initially going to be using a named user approach, which requires a refresh. I think it is every 150 or every 120 days. That on scale will not function. So the team has already developed what they perceive to be an answer for that. And we're looking to try to do a dual approach implementation at MnDOT using the named user approach initially, and then seeing if we can bring online what we're posing for the ultimate solution. Despite the plan for global standardization, how data will appear, the standard of electric is red or water blue, there may be a need for some FO specific stylization when FO personnel are looking at their corporate data. An example that MnDOT pointed out was that they have some special annotations for, I believe it is above ground cabinets, and that it's very helpful for their locators to be able to see, for instance, that information in that format. So we're taking a look at that one. The locators are bantering now for, as this thing moves to fruition, there's going to be a need for training and videos to support that, so folks can understand how the system works and be able to be up to speed on what they're looking at and so forth. And there's some heavy lifting ahead to create an ideal standards and best practices plan. I've been down this road before, and this will be I've been thinking I'd be able to get to it for the approximately last 10 months, but other stuff has gotten in the way. But now we're at the crux that we have to pull this together. And this is the bantering from the field, as Travis has brought in, that folks are trying to get an understanding of how they should be thinking about structuring things so that they're ahead versus trying to play catch up. But this is going to take some work, and it's going to take a lot of blessing from different components before we finally have something that we would issue as a best practices or standards plan. And just as a reminder, the approach that we're taking requires the end user not to change a single thing. There's a crosswalk piece of software that aligns the selected data sets on both ends between Fusion View and what the facility operator has. And once that's put in place, never needs to be updated unless there's a substantial change in the data services at the facility operator. So this kind of gives you a sense of what I'm talking about with that. I bucket it into three more or less areas that drive towards, it's easy to say attributes, but it goes beyond just thinking about uniform color code, for instance, at the American Public Works Association, or as has been pointed out by Meese crew, the 38-22 and the 75-22. That stuff will be pulled in, and we don't believe in, if you will, inventing the wheel or reinventing the wheel, but using what's already available. And there's certain Federal Geographic Data Committee standards that are still out there, and there's some other ones that impact strictly the attribute structure of how data is considered. Then there's the legal component that you see there in the center. And then last but not least, making all of this talk in a way so that it isn't proprietary, that it uses standards that are specific to this type of data and information, and making sure we're in compliance with all the stuff that's coming down the road. For instance, what Muddy is involved in over at the OGC. So we're working diligently to try to make sure all of that stuff lines up as well. And we're going to have to develop it in a document that relates how we have moved through this process and why the decisions have been made the way they have been. And ultimately, before everything gets poured in concrete, this is going to get beat up extensively. So that's where we are with that one. Gets us down to Fusion View open source end product. Okay, next up here is user interface development. So Caitlin's on the call, but what we wanted to point out here is we heard a lot about security and concerns and things of that nature from Lindsay's earlier comments. And here's the first instance. Caitlin is coming on board. She's worked with ShareGeo as a project-specific contractor since she started with ShareGeo as an intern in 2013. She's a thrill seeker, and so it's appropriate that she has come on board as the user interface developer. She likes to climb on those rock faces that go straight up. So again, I think that's a a appropriate alignment for what we're doing here. But you'll notice I've got there behind the first specific event hire, we're awaiting vetting because of making sure that as anyone that is involved in the actual programming process is reviewed by the overall team, and the blessing is given that from the security standpoint, we won't have bad software sending money to Russia built into the system. So that's where we're right there. And welcome on board, Caitlin. So we'll get you the final blessing here, and I'm sure in short order.
Thank you.
Okay. We're a little bit early now, but here we are. So Barb, are you with us?
Yes, I'm here. Just got off mute.
Okay. So what do you think? How do you want to handle this? You want to
Well,
send it
couple
around,
things.
or should we just open the floor?
I'd open the floor.
Okay. All right. The floor is open. So I know that Joe always gets things rocking and rolling. So Joe, do you have anything to kick it off? Joe's out fishing right now, probably, like maybe a beautiful September day. Okay, floor's open. Any comments? What can we do better? Barb, we're perfect.
No, it's
Means,
just fine. Yeah, go ahead. Oh,
Oh, I just said that's what it means. You guys are doing
Yeah.
great.
Okay. And last couple slides we got here for you. Next meeting info. As I said, you gotta blab it 3 times. There it is, Thursday, December 7th. I think that would be December 8th on the other side of the world. 2023, 1 p.m. Central. And are there any last comments that anybody would like to toss this way? Going once, going twice. All right, Barb, it's down to you. Final comments, and then I got my quote.
no, I'm all good. I think we've talked it out today. Thank you.
All right. Okay. Thanks, everybody. Here's your quote. The person that says it cannot be done should not interrupt the person doing it.
Very good.
Chinese
great.
proverb. All right. Thanks,
Okay.
everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Steve. Thanks,
Thanks.
Barb.
Thanks, everybody. Yeah, great. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.